The flight attendant looked terrified, and she was staring directly at the boy in seat 19B. What happened next would reveal a truth, so shocking that it would change everyone on that plane forever, and expose a mother's desperate secret that had been hidden for 12 years. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. And please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Marcus was sitting in seat 19B, pressed against the cold window of Flight 723 from Chicago to Los Angeles. He was 12 years old, traveling alone for the first time, wearing his best button-up shirt that his grandmother had ironed that morning. His hands were shaking, not from fear of flying, but from the weight of what he was about to do. In his backpack, tucked beneath his homework and a half-eaten sandwich, was a folder containing documents that could destroy his mother's life. But those documents might also save her. The flight attendant, a woman named Rebecca with kind eyes and graying hair, had noticed Marcus the moment he boarded. There was something about him that felt wrong. Not dangerous wrong, but heartbreaking wrong. The way he clutched his backpack, the way his eyes darted around the cabin, the way he flinched when anyone came near him. She had been a flight attendant for 23 years and had learned to read passengers like books. This boy was a story she needed to understand 2 hours into the flight. Rebecca was making her rounds through the cabin when she saw it. Marcus had fallen asleep, his backpack sliding from his lap onto the floor. Papers had spilled out, and one had landed near her feet. She bent down to pick it up, intending to tuck it back into his bag without waking him. But when she saw what was written on that paper, her blood ran cold. It was a medical document, a diagnosis, and the name on it was not Marcus Williams, the name on his ticket. It was Maya Williams. His mother, Rebecca's hands began to tremble as she read the words. Stage 4. Terminal. 6 months, at most. But it was what came next that made her gasp loud enough that the passenger in 19A turned to look at her. Below the medical diagnosis was another document, this one legal. It was a custody agreement, unsigned, and it detailed a plan to send Marcus to live with his father, a man named Robert Kane, in Los Angeles. But there were notes in the margins, written in a child's handwriting. They said things like he does not know me, and Mum says he left when I was born. And what if he does not want me? Rebecca looked down at Marcus, still sleeping, his face peaceful in a way that contradicted everything she had just read. She knew she should wake him, return the papers, pretend she had seen nothing. That was protocol. That was professional. But something deeper than protocol was pulling at her heart. This was a child in crisis, carrying a burden no 12-year-old should carry alone. She carefully gathered all the papers, placed them back in the backpack, and returned to the galley at the front of the plane. Her colleague, a younger attendant named James, noticed immediately that something was wrong. Rebecca pulled out her phone, breaking the rules about personal devices during flight duties. She needed to understand what was happening. She needed to know if this boy was safe, if this situation was what it appeared to be, or if there was something more sinister at play. She searched for Maya Williams, Chicago. What she found made everything worse. Maya Williams was a nurse at Cook County Hospital, a single mother, a woman who had dedicated her life to helping others, and she was dying. The cancer had spread so fast that by the time it was detected, there was nothing anyone could do. But here was the part that broke Rebecca's heart into pieces. Maya had no family, no parents, no siblings, no support system, just Marcus. And Robert Kane, the father who had walked away 12 years ago, Rebecca realized what Marcus was doing. He was not just traveling to meet a father he had never known. He was scouting. He was trying to see if this stranger, this man who shared his DNA but nothing else, could be the person to take care of him when his mother was gone. A 12-year-old boy was shouldering the responsibility of planning his own future, because his mother was too sick and too proud to ask for help. The thought made Rebecca physically ill. She returned to Marcus's row, and this time she knelt down beside his seat. She gently touched his shoulder, and he woke with a start, his eyes wide with panic until he remembered where he was. Marcus looked at Rebecca, and in that moment she knew that he knew. He could see it in her face. She had found the papers. She knew his secret. His eyes filled with tears that he tried desperately to blink away because 12-year-old boys are not supposed to cry on aeroplanes, surrounded by strangers. But Rebecca did something unexpected. She sat down in the empty seat beside him, the one in 19A, and she took his hand. She did not ask him questions. She did not demand explanations. She just sat there, holding the hand of a terrified child who was trying to be brave in a situation that required more courage than anyone should need. After several minutes of silence, Marcus began to talk. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. He told her about his mother, about how she had been feeling tired for months but kept saying it was just stress from work, about how one day she collapsed at the hospital and the doctors who were her colleagues became her physicians, about how she sat him down 3 weeks ago and told him the truth with tears streaming down her face. She was dying, and there was no miracle coming to save her. He told Rebecca about the nights he stayed awake listening to his mother cry in the next room, trying to figure out how to protect him from a future she would not be part of. He told her about finding his father's address, about begging his mother to let him take this trip, about promising her that he would be okay no matter what happened. But here was the part that made Rebecca's heart shatter completely. Marcus told her that he was not really trying to see if his father would take him in. He already knew the answer to that. His mother had reached out to Robert Kane 2 weeks ago, and the man had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with a son he never asked for. What Marcus was really doing was saying goodbye to a dream. He wanted to see his father's face just once, so that he could stop imagining what it might have been like to have a dad. He wanted to close that chapter of his life before everything fell apart. And then he was going to go back to Chicago and spend whatever time his mother had left making sure she knew she was enough, that she had always been enough. Rebecca could not speak. There were no words adequate for this moment, but she made a decision right there in seat 19A that would change everything. She was not going to let this child face his father alone. When the plane landed in Los Angeles, she was going to be there with him. Protocol did not matter anymore. Professional boundaries did not matter anymore. What mattered was that a 12-year-old boy who had already lost everything was about to face the man who had chosen to be nothing to him, and he deserved to have someone in his corner. The plane began its descent into Los Angeles, and Rebecca returned to her duties, but she kept watching Marcus, kept making sure he was okay. When they landed and passengers began to deplane, Marcus moved slowly, dragging his feet like a prisoner walking to his execution. Rebecca waited until almost everyone had left, and then she approached him. She told him that she had a 3-hour layover before her next flight, and if he wanted, she would go with him to meet his father. Marcus looked at her with such raw gratitude that she had to look away to keep from crying in front of him. They took a taxi to the address. Marcus had written on a crumpled piece of paper. It was a nice neighborhood in Pasadena, the kind with perfect lawns and expensive cars and driveways. Robert Kane's house was a 2-story colonial with a basketball hoop in the driveway and a minivan parked in front. Marcus stared at that minivan for a long time. It meant his father had other children, a family, a life that had no room for a son from a past he wanted to forget. Rebecca saw the pain in Marcus's eyes and wanted to drag him back to the taxi to spare him this moment. But she knew he needed this. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes, so he could stop wondering. Marcus walked up to the front door with Rebecca a few steps behind him. He rang the doorbell and they waited. When the door opened, Robert Kane was exactly what Marcus had imagined and nothing like him at the same time. He was tall, with Marcus's same brown eyes and dark hair, but his face held no warmth, no recognition, no hint of the connection that should exist between a father and son. Robert looked at Marcus, then at Rebecca, and his expression shifted from confusion to anger. He knew immediately why they were there. Before Marcus could say a word, Robert told him to leave. He said he had made his position clear to Maya. He had a family now, a real family, and he could not let some kid from a mistake he made in college disrupt that. He did not use Marcus's name. He called him some kid. Rebecca felt rage flood through her body, but Marcus just stood there, absorbing the rejection with a calmness that was more devastating than tears would have been. He looked at his father, this stranger who had given him life but nothing else, and he nodded slowly. Then he did something extraordinary. He thanked him. He thanked Robert for being honest, for not pretending, for making it clear so Marcus would never have to wonder. And then Marcus turned and walked back to the taxi, leaving his father standing in the doorway of his perfect house with his perfect life. In the taxi, Marcus finally broke. He cried the way children cry when they realize the world is not fair, when they understand that some people do not get the happy endings they deserve. Rebecca held him, this boy she had known for only a few hours but felt connected to in a way that defied logic. And she made another decision. She pulled out her phone and called her husband, a man named David who had always wanted children but had been unable to have them. She told him everything, speaking quickly and urgently, knowing that what she was about to suggest was crazy but also knowing it was right. When she finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. Then David said 3 words that changed everything. Bring him home. Rebecca looked at Marcus and told him that she had an idea. It was unconventional and complicated and would require lawyers and social workers and his mother's approval. But if Maya was willing, if Marcus was willing, Rebecca and her husband wanted to be his family, not to replace his mother, never that, but to be there when she could not be anymore, to make sure he was loved and safe and never alone. Marcus stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. He could not process what she was offering because it seemed too good to be true, too much like the dreams he had stopped letting himself have. They flew back to Chicago that evening, and Rebecca called in sick for her next shift. The first time she had done that in 10 years. They went directly to the hospital where Maya was receiving treatment. When Marcus walked into his mother's room with Rebecca beside him, Maya's face showed confusion, then understanding, then hope. Rebecca explained everything, and Maya listened with tears streaming down her face. She asked Rebecca why. Why would a stranger do this for her son, for her? Rebecca's answer was simple and profound. Because everyone deserves to be someone's priority. Because Marcus deserves a future filled with love. Because sometimes the universe puts people in your path for a reason, and you have to be brave enough to recognize it. The legal process took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of paperwork and background checks and meetings with social workers. 6 weeks during which Maya's health deteriorated rapidly, her body failing even as her spirit soared, knowing her son would be okay. Rebecca and David visited almost every day, getting to know Marcus, learning his favorite foods and his fears and his dreams. They were not trying to take Maya's place. They were building a bridge to the future, a future where Marcus would remember his mother not with the pain of abandonment, but with the peace of knowing she had loved him enough to find him a family. Maya Williams died on a Tuesday morning in October, with Marcus holding one hand and Rebecca holding the other. Her last words to Rebecca were thank you for seeing him, for really seeing him when the world looked away. And her last words to Marcus were, you are loved, you have always been loved, and you always will be. She passed quietly, her face peaceful, her heart finally able to rest, knowing her son's future was secure. Marcus went to live with Rebecca and David in their home in suburban Chicago. The adoption was finalized 4 months later. He kept his last name, Williams, because Rebecca insisted that honoring his mother's memory was important. But he also became part of a new family, one that chose him deliberately and loved him fiercely. He struggled at first, as any child would after losing their entire world. But slowly, with patience and therapy and the unconditional support of his new parents, Marcus began to heal. He learned that family is not always about blood. Sometimes it is about a flight attendant who saw a scared boy and decided that protocol mattered less than humanity. Sometimes it is about strangers who become parents because they recognize a child who needs them years later. Marcus would tell this story to anyone who asked about his family. He would talk about his mother Maya with love and pride, never shying away from the pain of losing her, but also celebrating the strength she showed in her final months. He would talk about the flight attendant named Rebecca who sat beside him in seat 19A and refused to let him face the worst moment of his life alone. And he would talk about David, the man who said bring him home without hesitation, who showed Marcus that fathers are made through actions, not genetics. Marcus became a social worker, dedicating his life to helping children in crisis. Children who needed someone to see them the way Rebecca had seen him. He never forgot what it felt like to be invisible, to be unwanted, to be terrified. And he made it his mission to make sure no child ever had to feel that way if he could help it. The story of Flight 723 became a reminder that heroism is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet and simple. Sometimes it is a flight attendant who breaks protocol to hold a child's hand. Sometimes it is a couple who opens their home and hearts to a boy they just met. Sometimes it is a dying mother who sets aside her pride to ask for help. And sometimes it is a 12-year-old boy who carries documents in his backpack and faces rejection with grace because he understands that love is not something you can force, but something you recognize when it is freely given. This story proves that even in our darkest moments, when everything seems lost, there are people who will step forward and say, I see you, I am here, and you are not alone. And that makes all the difference. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.